Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for a Learning and Growing webinar on creating social justice curriculums. Our presenter today is Cailyn Green of SUNY Empire State University. My name is Sidra, and I'll be your moderator today for Hawks Learning. We will have a live Q&A session after the presentation, so please enter any questions you have into the Q&A module as we go, and we'll be sure to answer them at the end. I'll now hand it over to our presenter.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Cailyn Green. I'm going to share my screen here and get everything going for us. Okay, so for this Hawks Learning webinar, we're going to be talking about creating social justice curriculum. I've been working specifically in this for about 2 years very heavily, so I was really excited to be able to share my expertise and my experience on this topic and how to do this topic. So first of all, the reason for this learning webinar, and the reason why I've been so deeply involved in creating social justice curriculum over the past 2 years, my university, Empire State University, like many other universities and colleges in the area, are adding a new general education requirement of social justice or diversity. What this means is that students, to earn an associate's or bachelor's degree, are going to need to take a certain level of credits in not only writing and math and arts or history, but also a social justice or a diversity requirement. What this means, though, is we need more classes that are going to meet this diversity or social justice general education requirement to count for the students. At the university where I work at, we were passing this new general education requirement, but we didn't have enough classes to really meet the needs of the students who are going to need to take this requirement. So a lot of our different departments started amping up and going, hey, let's develop some courses in our school or our departments to try to meet this new diversity general education requirement. This is a response to our current awareness of the importance of being in a social climate and how it's our responsibility to make the changes we want to see in the world. We have a responsibility as a university or as a college or as a school in general to make sure that our students are finishing their degrees with having a well-rounded approach at the world around them. And with us identifying finally the importance and the vitalness of social justice and diversity content, we are making this new general education requirement. Why am I qualified to talk about this? My PhD is not in social justice or diversity. This is kind of a passion project that I become more in tune with through my work at the university. I've developed a course that meets our new social justice education course, as well as I'm currently writing a textbook on social justice and the human services specifically. I'm also on the diversity, equity, and inclusion and social justice general education committee. So I'm part of a wonderful group of 5 professors who we take all proposed courses and we compare them to the general education requirements and learning outcomes outlined to see if that class should meet that general education requirement or not. With this extensive focus for the last 1.5 years, I really wanted to share my experience, the things I've learned along the way with anyone who's interested in possibly developing a social justice or diversity education class to count towards their university or college's new general education requirement. So first of all, the question we have to answer is, what is social justice? Social justice is a framework of political objectives pursued through social, economic, environmental, and political policies based on an acceptance of differences in diversity. With the recent COVID-19 pandemic, police shootings, movements, the disability justice movement, protests, we are clearly still working and actively working on how to promote equity in our immediate communities. One of our collective goals in working on this project is to impact social justice and equity through classroom learning. What this means is we want our students to be not only aware that these things are happening in the world around them, but how they're impacting them as students and them in their communities. Some of these social justice priorities can include voting rights, criminal justice, juvenile justice situations, environmental justice, immigration, and economic justice as well. This means that the courses that we approve and work to get approved to count towards the general education requirements, we want to encompass those types of hot topics or topics that might be difficult to talk about because of the possible political connotation around them. But these are things that are important in a current part of our lives, so that we want our students to be aware of them, and we want to educate our students in how they can talk about them in an educated manner. The curriculum that we develop to hopefully count toward a social justice or diversity general education requirement, we want to make sure that we're following a social justice pedagogy. What this means is that we want, beyond what is taught in the classroom, social justice pedagogy encompasses how it is taught and how students like our students are impacted socially and emotionally as well as intellectually. We want this content to apply to students in their real world lives. We don't want to be teaching this content as a history lesson or a history textbook. This is not history. This is current active events. We want to be teaching these situations, these contents, these topics as active in the students' lives right now. Pedagogy is an instructor's approach to teaching and how it impacts the learner socially, emotionally, and intellectually. And we know these social justice and diversity contexts impact our students in all of these different ways. We want to encourage our student to understand, challenge, and transform unequal power relationships. But they first need to understand what these concepts mean. What are relationships? How are powers unequally balanced? A social justice pedagogy can encourage students to challenge and transform these unequal power relationships within themselves. This can limit people's opportunities and potential. Teachers make issues of power and privilege explicit and provide students with opportunities to deconstruct these harmful images and affirm more positive ones. Students are encouraged to decide how structures that create social inequalities might be changed, to identify the step they could take to achieve that change. Again, a curriculum that is promoting social justice, we're not just teaching the concepts as historical pieces, but we're encouraging students to brainstorm. We're teaching them how can they actively make these changes in their lives, in the lives of their families around them, in the lives of their immediate communities around them. It's a very active way of teaching this very unique curriculum. It moves beyond teaching about social justice issues for the purpose of increasing student consciousness of social justice issues by acknowledging the challenges faced by students in their classroom contexts. And in response, we want to aiming to create classroom climate that embraces multiple perspectives and provides equitable opportunities for learning. We want the students to be a part of this learning process. This is not a lecture-based curriculum. This should be a very interactive-based curriculum. We want to acknowledge the inequalities in the classroom between our students. We want to give them a voice to talk about how they feel a power differential between the instructor and themselves, or student services and themselves. This is how we can really help them open up to these real world challenges that they face, as well as those bigger picture type of situations. We want to embrace multiple perspectives and provide equitable opportunities for learning. We want students to be able to share their different perspectives on the content that we bring in, because we as professors or curriculum developers, we are only one person, right? We don't know everything. Our perspective is only from our brain, from our mouth. We want to make sure that we're bringing in our students' perspectives as well. That is how we're going to broaden our perspectives to be able to teach it better to a wider variety of students. I wanted to give a little background on the class that I was a part of developing, and we have since been approved, which is very exciting. So this class is now counting towards our social diversity general education requirement. So I wanted to go over this briefly with you, but I also want to leave it on the screen here for you to have a chance to, if you want to, take a screenshot of it or take a picture of it so that you have this for your records, that if you're ever interested in developing a social justice class to meet your general education requirement, you can help maybe use this as a brainstorming kind of jump off tool of what has been approved in the past. So our class, I specifically work in the School of Human Services. So we developed a social justice and human services course. This course provides a multidisciplinary overview of social justice and diversity undercurrents in the human service specific field, drawing on insights from law, political science, history, sociology, social psychology, and economics. This course introduces past and persisting inequities and disparities in service delivery, as well as historical and current examples of community action, advocacy, and activism across helping professions. Quick insert here. I want us to really take a specific note as to how we're not just talking about historical or past events. That's a part of how we're starting the class off, but we come up to current active events. And we're not just talking about what has happened, but we're also bringing concepts of advocacy and activism to help show students what they can actively do in their communities to promote these new concepts. Learners will gain knowledge of social justice theoretical frameworks, advocacy strategies, and research related to access, equity, diversity, and belonging in the development and delivery of human services. Again, side note, you'll see because this class is focused in the human services field, that's where a lot of the sentences kind of start and end with. But this is a great example of how if you're teaching a class in another department, you can use these same concepts, but weave your own department title into this overall class description here. This course will explore power differentials across race, class, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, religion, ability, and how these forces overlap and affect change in human service environments. That overlap is very, very important. We don't want to be talking about these social justice and diversity concepts as silos. They're not silos. They are all connected. They interact with each other through the students' beings, through the students' work, through the students' lives. So we want to make sure that that's how we're teaching this content, that it all interacts with itself and how they support or hurt each other, essentially. Students will assess their own perceptions and biases while considering how this influences their social justice efforts within their community and also across helping professions. So our learning outcomes are derived directly from our social diversity overall learning outcomes. We will describe the historical and contemporary societal factors that shape the development of individual and group identity involving race, class, culture, and gender within human service settings. Again, that human service settings can be changed to whatever department or class or concept you're building this class off of. 2, we want students to analyze the role that complex networks of social structures and systems play in the creation and perpetuation of the dynamics of power, privilege, oppression, and opportunity that impacts the delivery of human services. This is that complex network situation of social structures and systems. It's, I think, at least from the experience from being on the DEISJ General Education Curriculum Committee, we found a lot of instructors have beautiful classes and they have embedded these wonderful cultural competency or diversity modulars or topics into the class. And that's a wonderful way and necessary way to bring those things into every class. But just because you have a topic or an assignment or a section or a header on cultural competency or diversity or social justice does not mean the entire class is going to be strong enough or in depth enough to really count towards a social justice general education requirement. This is where that gen ed comes into play here, that systems approach, the social structures, the networking approach. The entire class really has to be focused on this concept of social justice and diversity situation for it to really count towards that gen ed piece. We've had a lot of classes come through the curriculum committee, and we've really supported instructors on tweaking their classes to really meet that bigger social structure or systems approach. And they've been able to meet the gen ed requirement just beautifully. But it does require a little bit of tweaking because just having that cultural competency assignment or a chapter is not going to be enough to really satisfy that general education requirement. And then apply the principles of rights, access, and equity and autonomous participation to past, current, and future social justice action within the human service environments. Even with this class itself, We went back and forth with, at the time, was a different gen ed committee that I was not a part of, right? Conflict of interest. We went back and forth with them for 6 months on tweaking words and really getting that bigger picture approach, because we really wanted this class to count towards that general education requirement and not just have a class in social justice. But if your university or college is creating a new social justice general education requirement, hopefully you have a wonderful gen ed committee. If you don't, ask about that. Ask, hey, how can I create a gen ed social justice committee to help support my fellow instructors and professors or curriculum developers in guiding them through the process to create a strong course who's going to be able to meet this new general education requirement. The university I teach for really wants diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice to be integrated throughout the course. This is a framework that the committee and I developed, that we kind of blasted out to the entire State University of New York Empire system to help them identify if they think their class is going to be able to meet the general education requirement, or how they can kind of supportively tweak it to be able to meet that. So we want these concepts integrated throughout the course, not just in 1 or 2 modules. We want content and learning activities must be substantially explore race, class, and gender identity. One of these is not going to be enough. We want all of these kind of topics covered throughout the class. The course must explicitly address how institutional and societal structures lead to inequities across the groups. We want to hit that micro, meso, and macro approach. We want to hit all 3 of them to meet that general education requirement. Students must be given opportunities to apply a social justice framework to analyze questions of identity and equity. We want the students to be asking in-depth questions and then answering them throughout their learning process. And the course must clearly address and assess all DEISJ learning outcomes for it to be approved. We really need it to be able to hit all those concepts. If a class comes through that is really, really strong in 1 or 2 of them, it's not enough to be that general education to satisfy the general education requirement. Again, that doesn't mean the class isn't strong in itself, right? You could have a really strong class, but in order for it to meet the gen ed, we needed to hit all of whatever learning outcomes your institute has decided are going to be required. So how we suggest or how we support curriculum developers in creating these new courses. First, we identify the desired results. This is going to be to create a class that meets your school's learning outcome requirements. Follow that language precisely. It has been developed that way for a reason. In that same sentence, I'm not saying copy word for word the learning outcomes and use them as your learning outcomes, but I'm saying use them very, very closely as a guidance to how you develop and how you create learning outcomes. Because those learning outcomes need to be so closely matched to the learning outcomes created for the general education requirement, not all classes that already exist are going to be able to meet that gen ed requirement. That's just the reality of it. And you could have an extremely strong class, but not all classes are going to be able to be tweaked or morphed to meet the new general education requirement, but some absolutely will be. This is where you work with that committee on that. We want to determine acceptable activities. We want to figure out the textbooks. Do we have OERs? Do we have videos, multimedia resources, discussions, essays, project or self-assessments? Once you determine what type of assignments you have, we can plan the learning experiences. We want to organize by the modular, create assignments, and etc. We have found that when our instructors work in reverse this way, they're really able to create a class or tweak an existing class to strongly meet those learning outcomes so that we can get that class approved for the general education, to satisfy the general education course. Some tips that we have found helpful in working on this committee to getting some of those classes through the committee to get approved. First, we found it helpful to create a crosswalk document that all faculty must submit along with their course description and learning outcomes. We created our own crosswalk document with the 3 learning outcomes that our SUNY social justice education general ed learning outcomes now follow. You could easily create one with your own learning outcomes, right? And you want to keep it simple. You want to explain the learning outcomes. What's the learning outcome that this new course is going to have? How is it going to meet it? How is it going to meet it in a structural as well as a meso, macro, and micro approach? So you want to really outline it as cleanly as possible so that the instructors who are creating this, filling out this document for you, understand what they need to hit in order to make it a general education to satisfy the gen ed requirement. Also, keep it simple. Follow your school's learning outcomes. Don't stray from these. They were created for a reason. Follow what it says. That's how we get these classes approved. Reach out to your gen ed committee for review before you formally submit their proposal. Ask them for help through the process. They're going through this process on a monthly basis, reviewing classes. This stuff is fresh in their head. Ask them for help on it, okay? Part of that gen ed committee, their job is they want these classes approved. They know we need more gen ed classes to meet this new gen ed requirement. This crosswalk helps faculty visually see that they are meeting all their requirements. This helps keep the process easier for our gen ed committee so we can evaluate courses quicker and more efficiently. So I really wanted to open this up to what questions do we have about this? What are your current experiences in developing social justice curriculum? Have you done it? Have you played around with that yet? How is it working for you? This is a place where we should really expand and explore and give each other tips and tricks or what's worked for us or where we're finding ourselves stuck. We're finding a lot of our instructors are having a challenging time doing this. I think it's because so many of our instructors have developed such great classes that they've worked for years to include that diversity or that cultural competency component already. But a general education requirement is different than a simple cultural competency component. A couple of questions. Reference page, absolutely. Let me share that over there again. So this is one of the big references that I used. It's fair. There are a lot of great social justice textbooks and resources out there right now. It's important for us to be looking amongst multiple of them, right? Because social justice can be so heavily influenced by personal bias and institutional or structural bias. We want to make sure that when we're developing curriculum, we're including as many different perspectives as we possibly can. And I know this is challenging because, again, we are only one brain each, right? So this is the importance of collaborating when we're developing social justice curriculum. How are we bringing in different people, different perspectives to create a strong curriculum to satisfy that general education requirement? Can't really see the screen when I have that up. So I'm going to, hopefully you've taken a picture of that resource so you have it. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see our chat again here. So I would love to hear some ideas on what's working for people, what people are struggling with. Do you have a social justice general education committee currently reviewing courses? What does that look like for you?
We have a question. What do you do if the students aren't engaged in the content?
Great question. Thank you. So engaging students in social justice curriculum can be really tricky because they are heated, heavy, very important topics. Students can either get, I don't want to say too excited about it, they can get very, very engaged, or we see the opposite of students not wanting to talk about it at all. They almost feel weird or uneasy. As instructors, we may feel uneasy about it as well. A way that I have found to help engage students in that is to try to connect it to their current everyday lives. So not just bring it up as the bigger picture or their bigger movements, but how is it impacting them on their way to class today? How are these social justice concepts or issues impacting them at work today? bringing it down to that micro approach of how it's interacting with the students on a daily basis helps them process and engage so they can look at then how is that affecting them in the bigger scheme of things. Another question I have here, what are some of the general courses currently available that may be replaced with a social justice course? So interesting question. Currently at the State University of New York, we have not replaced any general education requirements. We have simply added a new social justice one. So previously, students are required to take a certain number of credits in math and communications, and then they had a choice between five of the seven: arts, humanities, world history, U.S. history, foreign language, the arts. I'm missing something here. But now students are going to be required to take a math class, a basic communications class, as well as a social justice class. So again, we're not taking anything away. We're not replacing anything. We're simply mandating that one of the general education requirements be a social justice approved class. Then they get to choose 4 of the others between arts, history, humanities, foreign language, all the other kind of fun stuff. So we have determined that the social justice background is of equal importance as the math and basic communications background. So the sociology department is doing really, really, really great. Actually, they are getting courses in there because a lot of sociology courses are rooted in those social justice curriculum. So it has been, I don't want to say easier, but it's been a quicker path to get those courses moved through because a lot of them are already rooted in that. But with that same thought, I don't want to steer away people and professors in different departments to create a class rooted in social justice. This human service class took a lot of work, but we worked with a lot of the sociology professors in helping view it through the lens of social justice in that human services approach. Loving to find a way to incorporate more positive and contributions of various marginalized populations. So a way that I have been finding to do that, and so while I'm part of this wonderful project, I'm actually creating a social justice textbook that I'm writing. So I have been speaking a lot of conferences regarding this. And I've been speaking at conferences, but not just conferences about textbooks, but conferences about marginalized populations. And I've been doing that to get different approaches. I've also been incorporating, I think we have like 12 different peer reviewers for the textbook because we wanted each chapter to be peer reviewed by a specific person who is an expert in that topic. And it's brought in so much of different perspectives, but important perspectives that, again, I only know what I know. And even while I'm writing the textbook, it has been challenging to write on topics that I'm not an expert in. And I want people who are experts to give me their opinion on the book, their approach. And we've been really beefing the book up, focused on those perspectives. But talking to your colleagues at your university or other universities about assignments that they have or different activities they do to help support your learning curriculum for your students. Any other questions or thoughts that we think we can share with each other? Okay, great question here. Will this course's curriculum be available at 16 weeks flex or flex 8-week, or be available to cover all course objectives? Great question. So the course that we developed, we will be teaching it both in the 15-week term that we teach, but we're also able to condense it to a condensed 8-week express term. Same assignments, just shorter time frame. And that's the way that the State University of Empire State University works, is we offer courses in the 8-week section. It doesn't change any learning outcomes. It doesn't cut anything out. It's simply a condensed time period. And we offer that because we have a very unique population of students. A lot of our population of students are within the age range more of 30 to 50 years old. So a lot of them have full-time jobs or full-time caregivers. And a lot of them are able or have expressed to us that they'd rather take more courses or more work in a short 8-week period and kind of cram through it, and then be able to just focus on their day-to-day lives for the second half for the term versus having education spread out over the full 16 weeks. So we do that at our university, but again, the learning outcomes do not change. They do not shift. They do not get condensed. The learning activities all stay the same as well. The students just have half the time to do it in. That's the reality of our population. And our students really enjoy taking some of those express term classes when they want that. But if not, we offer it also in the full 16-week term. Great question. What other thoughts or questions do we have? These are fantastic. This is really how we can get the information out there to each other about how to either beef up our classes or tweak our current classes, or maybe we go, you know what, I have some great classes that I thought were going to work for the new general education requirement. They're just not meeting the mark, and I don't want to change the class I have because I have a great class in what it is itself. So you know what? Start from scratch. Create a whole new class, learn using those specific learning outcomes that your university or institute has determined are the learning outcomes required to be met in order to satisfy this new general education requirement. Create a class from scratch. Create a team of 3 or 4 professors and start that on your own. One activity that I use in my course to have a guest speaker from specific people groups and speak about their experiences. That is wonderful. And a great example of how to incorporate that into a class is maybe the speaker can't always come every term, record them, right? Create video webinars of those speakers and embed them into your classes. Of course, having live speakers is always best, but we can't always do that with obvious time restrictions or schedules. So if they're able to be recorded, record them and build them into your class so you have them for future terms. Another question is, what do assessments for this class look like? For example, are the assessments multiple choice questions? So for this class specific, the one that I created, well, I'm a part of a team creating it. We have a lot of self-reflection assignments and essay assignments. And we determined we didn't want the short answer or the multiple choice because we're teaching this curriculum to be a really deep dive of how the student understands the content. So I'm not looking for them to regurgitate historical facts about social justice to me. That's in our mind, that's what a history class is for. And that's going to meet the history gen ed requirement, right? For the social justice requirement, we want students to be able to understand how some of those historical events impact the community, impact them, and are going to impact the future of social justice concepts. So their written papers, their long answer, their essays, their self-reflection assignments. And the self-reflection ones are really, really interesting. And the students get just as much educational support and educational knowledge out of the self-reflection assignments that they do of the more structured research-based assignments. At least that's what we have found. What other questions or thoughts do we have? These are fabulous so far. Sharing all these ideas, this is how we create stronger courses.
There's one comment about how someone uses an activity in their course where they have guest speakers speak about specific people groups, and they speak about their experiences, and their students really enjoy it.
Yeah, these would be, again, the great ones to record if the speaker's okay with that, so that you have them saved to continue to use for other courses in future terms. There's also a lot of great YouTube videos out there. Don't be afraid to look for YouTube videos that may talk on the concepts that you want to bring into the course, but the YouTube video or the TED Talk may come at it from a different perspective. That's another way that we as instructors can bring in different perspectives.
One other question we have, how do you make my class count towards a social justice or a diversity gen ed?
Great question. This would be work with your general education committee, work with them, ask for their input before you even formally submit the proposal for it. Give them learning outcomes, give them an example of the textbook you want to use, of a couple of the full outlined assignments, outline the course in its topics or its chapters, or however you're going to organize the course. create the entire course and then ask for their input before you submit it. This helps kind of get rid of some of that back and forth that we can go through when it starts in the actual formal proposal process, right? We know that back and forth can take a long time, but if we can ask for some support before we formally submit it, we can get some of that back and forth out of the way. I found much quicker than after we formally submit it. But ask for help in that. That's why you have your general education committee, curriculum committee in existence. And again, if you don't have one that exists, talk to someone about creating one. Get 2 or 3 people to kind of get focused in it and to offer that support so you can get more classes provided. Would you be able to share a role model social justice representative for our modern times to provide some leadership for review and study? I will share my email address here, and I'm more than happy to share the crosswalk document that we use, that we have found really supports or guides our instructors on helping make the class they want to count towards general education, or for them to visually see if it's able to be tweaked enough to count for that. 1 second. So my email is in the chat. If you're interested in that crosswalk document, please don't hesitate to email me, ask me for it. Okay, I'm more than happy to send that over. It's a simple document. It's nothing fancy, nothing you couldn't create on your own. But sometimes just having one already created can spark us to get that going and visually see how we're meeting all those learning outcomes.
All right, that looks like all the time we have for questions today. Thank you, Cailyn, and thank you all for attending today. We will be emailing you a link to view the recording of this webinar once it's available. If you or any of your fellow instructors are interested in presenting for our Learning and Growing webinar series, please submit your proposals to the Learning and Growing website, which I'm going to link in the chat now to access, for easy access. There is a comment that they can't see the email. I think it wasn't sent to everyone. I'm just going to copy paste it again for everyone.
Thank you
No
so
problem.
much.
These free webinars are brought to you by Hawks Learning, an innovative educational courseware company. To learn more about our mastery-based course materials and how Hawks could enhance learning outcomes for you and your students, please visit hawkslearning.com. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you so much.